Hey everybody, it's Jason, and this is Clockwork Angel Studios and Ether RPG. And today we're going to be talking about character sheet building. I'm going to walk you step by step through the process of how we go from start to finish on a character sheet for Ether RPG. Now, I'm not going to go into incredible detail on this video because, well, that would take a lot of explanation and a lot of time. This is meant to be a quick and dirty, so I'm going to show you, basically, how all these numbers come about, where they come from, how they work together, and some of the options available to you when creating a character for Ether RPG. So, let's get right to it. I've chosen to actually build one of the characters out of the story that's prevalent in Ether RPG, and that would be Seraph, the Thief. I've chosen to build her at level 1, as you can see. And we start with 0 experience, which is pretty normal, and your renown is how well your character is known. It's randomly rolled at start, and the character happens to be infamous instead of famous, and has a rating of 5. What that number means will become more clear when Ether RPG becomes available. Basically, the higher the number, the more well-known you are, for good or for bad. Now, Seraph, we've recorded, is a mortal, and mortals happen to be their own subspecies. There's no additional tags or anything on there. Some species that is relatively important, in fact more than relatively important. They add additional modifiers and things. Mortals are pretty simple, so that's why I've chosen to go with mortal, just to keep it standard, brief, and easy. Now, Seraph by trade is a smuggler. What a smuggler does, what that trade does for you, is give additional edges, special abilities, or skills. And archetype is a loner. Basically what that means is your archetype defines what type of person you are. So whenever Seraph is doing something on her own, or something to benefit her and only her, she gets bonuses to her rolls. And all archetypes work like that. Whenever you stick to your archetype, you get roll bonuses. Moving on, we see that Seraph has a few stigmas here. Stigmas, think of them as negative qualities. So she has a debt. She's marked, so there's a bounty on her head, and she's a mutant. So there's something about her physical appearance that makes her striking, stand out, something possibly to be feared or something to be hated. And of course, we have a lot of lovely aesthetics here that you see on most character sheets. You know, size, gender, age, height, weight, the usual. And of course, a little section for features, which I've not filled out. It's not necessary for the purpose of this example. So once you've figured out your class, and you're given your level and your species, and you've chosen stigmas and trait and archetype, which is really some of the starting things you go with, it is important to determine what your attributes are sooner than later. Attributes are one of the major driving forces in the game. Well, it just so happens that I've used a point buy system. Now there is a roll system as well, where you can actually grab some dice or whatnot and actually roll out your statistics, but for purposes of this generation, I've chosen to use a point buy. The higher the better. Normally statistics range from 1, which is terrible, to 10, which is great. Now you can get above the standard if your species gives you a bonus. In this case, mortals do in fact get a bonus to a statistic, so it happens that Seraph has an 11 agility. The statistics are relatively straightforward. Agility, might, mettle, which you might call stamina or endurance, guile, intelligence or intellect, perception, presence, charisma, and luck. They all factor into most of the skills throughout the game and give you a bonus on what your skills do. These are derived statistics, so we will come back to them later, as are these. There's no sense in talking about them right now until I tell you why they're there. The next most important things to look at, is actually skills. Now, there are 3 types of skills in Ether RPG. There's combat skills, lore skills, and utility skills. Combat skills primarily are used purely for combat. Lore skills are knowledges. They're what you know how to do, but not necessarily how you do it. That's utility. Utility is just doing things, mostly non-combative. So, based upon your character's class, that determines how many skills you get in various categories. The Thief, as you can see, gets quite a few combat skills, only a handful of lore, but an enormous number of utility skills. The Warrior, for example, would get an enormous number of combat skills, few lore, and few utility. So it depends upon your class. Now, there are ways of switching that around, but this is the standard build, and that's what we're going to stick to. Now, you might notice that some of these are bolded out. Well, they're written over with E's. E stands for experienced, I stands for inexperienced. Inexperienced skills are all the skills I have that are unfilled. I didn't choose to fill them out to keep the sheet easier to read. All the experienced skills are filled in. The difference between experienced and inexperienced is experienced are the skills you're good at. You have a large bonus to them. You get better bonuses to them. You can see the lines right up here where it actually shows it, inexperienced versus experienced. So for an experienced skill, whenever you're determining what you roll, you add your level, plus your relevant statistic, plus half of your luck score, plus 5, plus any modifiers you have. Now on the flip side, inexperienced skills, half your level, plus your statistic, plus half your luck, plus any modifications. So let's just take, for example, unarmed here. Well, unarmed is an agility skill, so that's 11. Half of 8 is 4. Level 1 is 1. And the 5-point bonus. There's no other really bonuses that Seraph has right now, so that totals up to a total of 21 when you add those numbers together. Now let's say Seraph were actually inexperienced and unarmed. Well, in that case, it would be 11 plus 4 plus, well, that's it. Because half your luck, or half your level, rounded down, is 0, and you don't get the 5-point bonus. So it would just be 11 and 4, and that's it. So Seraph would only have a 15. You can see even at level 1, there's a 6-point difference between unarmed experienced and unarmed inexperienced. That difference will grow wider and wider as the game goes on. Now, as you can see, I filled out the numbers based upon that formula to all these different skills and given them a total. The same goes over here for lore, and I gave them a total. And the same over here goes for utility, and I gave them a total. There are a few numbers in here that are modified. For example, Seraph actually has an edge, a special ability, that gives her bonuses to acrobatics and athletic-based jumps. But they're circumstantial, so I chose to add a bonus off to the side, so I know that it doesn't always count. So, you've heard me mention edges a couple times. What are edges? Where are they? Oh, there they are. This entire section of notes here. Now, normally a character sheet in Ether RPG will actually have two sides, but for the purposes of showing you in a simplistic manner what building a character sheet looks like, I've chosen just to use the notes section to record the character's edges. Normally in the back, there'll be an entire edge section and equipment section, which you will have further room for equipment like weapons, armor, etc. But for the ease of the video, I've just included them here. Now, Seraph has several categories she has chosen from. This is a category for being immortal. This is just a miscellaneous category, a type of a combat form, combat edges, and skills and edges for being a thief. So, Seraph has chosen Mechanize, which gives her the ability to basically use cybernetics. Elemental Affinity, which gives her elemental vigors. Second Chances gives her re-rolls gives her bonuses when she needs to re-roll a dice. Mech Affinity gives her more cybernetics. Lucky gives her dice re-rolls. Aerobatics, you remember I mentioned those circumstantial bonuses, the 20s? Aerobatics is what generates that. Gives her bonuses when doing jumps. From the Shadows and Like a Shadow enhances her ability to use stealth and be unseen. And then Heavy-Handed increases her damage when just using her fists. Dual Wield lets her fight with both hands. And Unarmored Mastery makes it very difficult for her to be hit when she's unarmored. Now the fist form, yuck it up. Anyway, it's a martial art form focusing upon the use of one's hands, punches, elbows, anything basically from the shoulder down to the fist. And you get special abilities, multiple of them to use based upon that technique. I've not recorded them because that's something you'll see when Ether RPG is played. So, we've gone over how you generate skills and how they total up, your edges that you can choose from, and there's a huge list, over 200 to choose from. I couldn't possibly go over what they are available and why you get them. Just know that characters get a select amount at game start, and they get them every single level they level up. Plus, the GM can vary how many or how few you get at character gen. You can see over here the character has chosen a few languages, and then down here, of course, is where we filled out the character's weapons and types of armor. So, you'll notice over here, right up here, that we have lists of these lovely statistics. So what are all these derived statistics I've spoken about? Well, here's your vitality. As you can see up here, it actually shows how you generate your vitality based upon your level. So at level 1, it's your class plus your race die, or species die, plus your metal, or your class Level 2 plus is your class or your raised die plus metal. One or the other. You don't get to do both. So we total that to a total of 20. It just so happens that her class, species plus metal happens to total to 20 vitality points. There's your combat speed. You can see that's agility plus perception. That's how quickly you go. Think of that as your initiative. And then, of course, we have critical hit chance and critical hit defense. This is the chance you have at critically hitting others. This is the chance you have this is how much you reduce others' chance of critically hitting you. Critical hit dice are percentile rolls, by the way, hence the multiple numbers there. Now, you can see here we have some derived combat movements and overland movements. You can see that unmodified overland movement has a set value, and combat movement, however, has a variable value. Agility plus your metal, and then you divide it up going down. Again, this will make more sense when you actually see how the game works, what it means. Typically, these are used in hex squares on a combat grid. So that 2, there is 2 squares, or about 10 feet, or about 3 meters, depending upon how you're looking at it. Now these statistics over here, further derived statistics. Resistance and resilience. Well, that's your ability to reduce magical damage or reduce physical damage. She has no immunity, so there's nothing she's just flat out immune to. Her vigors. Now, there's various different forms of damage in Aether. You have damage coming from technology, damage coming from spells, damage coming from weapons, and damage coming from elemental effects, like bursts of fire coming from another plane, or an alchemical bomb. It just so happened that vigors focus upon your elemental resistance. So vigors reduces the damage coming at her from earth, fire, wind, and water. Water and wind. And has no vulnerabilities. Now, normally, you're only really going to have 1 vigor. It just so happens that mortals happen to have the property to give them multiple elemental affinities, and Seraph has it. So, I've spoken about many of the specifics of the character sheet now. I think I've given you an idea of what you have to choose from. How to just build a character sheet. You can see by looking at here, it isn't terrifyingly complicated. The numbers are almost practically calculated for you, and that's pretty much all there is to it. Other than that, really the only thing beyond this would be purchasing equipment and or, if you happen to be a sorcerer, choosing spells. Most everything else, well, that's it. So, if you have any comments, questions, or other ideas you might have, things you want to throw my way, feel free to leave them on the comments section of this video. By all means, ask away. I will answer as best I can. So, that's it for this time, and until next time, thanks everybody for watching.